Welcome to paperthreads Cutter Vision Tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to set your blade length and how to test it on the material that you're cutting. The first thing to note is that on this blade holder, how you adjust your blade length is to go ahead and turn this adjustment knob. The further out that the adjustment knob is from the back of the blade holder, the further in your blade will be retracted. The further in that your knob is turned towards the blade holder, the further out that blade will be retracted. So I can see here that that blade is now sticking out quite far. Okay, so to set my blade for my material, I'm going to go ahead and retract the blade in almost all the way. Then I'm going to take my paper. In this case, this is Cascada paper by Whirlwind. It's got a pretty good thickness to the paper. It's one of my favorites that I like to use. And I'm going to go ahead and hold this paper up to the end of my blade, and I'm going to see if that blade is sticking out far enough. And I have to just look at this visually and visualize it and see. By holding this up, I can see. Another way is with regular cardstock. Sometimes you can poke it through, and if it pokes through too far, then it's sticking out too far. In this case, I think that's sitting pretty good. So to test this, I'm going to go ahead and fold my paper in half. And I'm going to take my blade holder, I'm going to hold it straight up and down on my paper so that it's perpendicular to the paper, and using about the same pressure that I would use for an X-Acto knife, I want to rub this against the paper. When I do that, I can see that it's cutting through the cardstock, but not quite all the way. That means my blade is not sticking out far enough, and I need to go ahead and retract it. When I retract it, I'm just going to retract it about half a turn. Okay, and when I'm turning that half a turn to stick that blade out further, then I'm going to go ahead and test it again by rubbing my blade along the paper. And just half a turn on that blade knob was enough to change that from barely cutting, right here where it barely cut through, you can see it started to, but didn't quite get all the way, to cutting through perfectly. Not only that, but I can see here that it did not leave any marks on the other side of the paper. Now, if my blade was set too far out, so I'm going to go ahead and set that out just a little bit further, another half a turn. And I'm going to set that out a little too far. When I rub that across, I also leave markings in the back end of the paper. So yes, it cut through all the way here, but it also left a marking in the back and tore my paper on the back side. So I know that that's sitting out too far, and I need to go ahead and pull the blade back in a little bit by going another half a turn and trying it again. By applying some pressure, I can see I cut all the way through, but I did not leave markings in the back side. And that's how you adjust your blade. Yes, there are click holders out on the market that are available where you just turn the knob and it clicks into place. But the difference is I can have infinitesimal adjustment on that blade, and I can make that blade just perfect so that I'm not having any mat scratches or markings into my mat. The less markings into the mat that I can make, the more control I'm having over my cut, the better preciseness my cut's going to get, and the longer my blade is going to last because I'm not dulling that tip by cutting into the mat. Okay, now a little bit of faint lining in your mat is sometimes okay. It's just when you get it too far out and it sticks out too far. And with the click blade holder, you can't control that as well as you can with this blade holder. Another thing to check is if you're cutting something like vinyl. Now, vinyl is a very thin material. This is the Oracal 631 gray vinyl, and this material is very, very thin. And to adjust your blade holder on this, you actually want your blade almost to the point where you can't visibly see it, but you might be able to feel it. I can't visibly see this blade, but when I rub my finger across, I can feel a little bump on there. And so now I'm going to take that, rub that against my vinyl, and if it's enough, it will cut through. I can see here it didn't cut through, so I need to get it set out just a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and rub that on my vinyl. And when I press that on my vinyl, I can see that I cut through the vinyl. Just have a hard time lifting it, but I cut through the vinyl perfectly, but I did not cut through or mark that backing. It's very important when you're doing vinyl to really get that adjustment just right. I can adjust this and stick this out even further and do the vinyl, and it's going to cut through that top layer, but maybe not through the bottom layer. But if it's out too far, even though I'm not seeing the markings in the bottom layer or they're very faint markings, what's going to happen is as you're pulling your blade along, it's going to lift that vinyl up. So you want to make sure that it's out just the exact amount for cutting on vinyl. It's very important. Okay, and that's how you adjust and test your blade when you're setting it for cutting different material. Thank you for watching Paper Threads Cutter Vision tutorials. We hope that you found this tutorial useful. You can find this tutorial and more at our blog at paperthreadsblog.com. Thank you.